Hi and welcome to Alexander Technique London. My name's Adrian and today we're going to be discussing what I think the Alexander Technique is in a nutshell. It's kind of a follow-on from my last video on is the Alexander Technique difficult, which I basically said no, it wasn't. The Alexander Technique is simple, but we're complicated. And I'm going to add a bit of context to that now in explaining that all the terminology that we use within the Alexander Technique is really just an aspect, various different aspects of what one could call presence. When one is present, you have the ability to make better choices. And when one's present, one tends to have more poise, which if you've seen any of my videos before, you know I much prefer the word poise to posture. I know the Alexander Technique is very much equated with posture, but we really like to think in terms of poise, which is a quality. And Alexander wrote about thinking more than anything else, not what you think about, not the content of your thinking, but the quality of your thinking. And again, that's just presence. So if we take a term like inhibition, the ability to be unreactive, that's your ability to be present to the stimulus that's present that you're being subjected to, and seeing if you can make a reasoned and proportionate response to it rather than merely reacting. When you're present, that is a quality of being that is descriptive of inhibition. Presence is the place in which end gaining can be neutered. End gaining, another Alexander term. The means whereby the process, being present to the process. If you're present to the process, the end results are given. If we take something like directing. Now, directing is a funny one, and I have to admit, I sometimes over the years, I've felt it's been a very unclear term. And I've kind of reframed it for myself. So this is a bit of a personal one, not necessarily the entire Alexander community think this way. If you've seen any of my other videos, I'm obsessed with gravity and that it's a positive influence on our life, a positive influence on our posture. Can't have posture without it. And that directing for me kind of falls into two categories. When we talk about the head-neck relationship, and we talk about letting the neck be free to let the head go forward and up. So that's up and forward, this rotation forward of the head over the atlanto-occipital joint. That is a byproduct of gravity pushing you up. And if you've not watched any of my other videos, that might sound like a weird thing to say that gravity is pushing you up. But it's true that the ground is effectively acting like an accelerating surface underneath us. And if you're unsure about that, just look into, just look into general relativity and Einstein, as if that's going to be a simple thing to do. But if you go onto YouTube and look up is gravity a force, that's what that subject will cover, general relativity, and it will explain why the ground is actually coming up underneath us. So directing is, for me, in many ways, is being present to that upwards force. And because of the nature of our evolution, our structure, our head will go forward and up as a byproduct of it. So the primary control is often considered kind of the starting point for the Alexander Technique. The primary control is the name for that head-neck relationship. For me, it's kind of secondary, actually, because it's a byproduct of our evolution due to our environment of an accelerating surface. So if I'm present to our environment and I intend to go with the reality of that environment, I will be directed upwards. And my head will be directed forward and upwards. But it's not the only direction we have, because we can obviously work in all sorts of different planes. I think another form of directing is to be out engaged in an expansive way into our environment, just like every other animal species is. You know, they are intelligent beings. They may not have language, but they're very present and they navigate their environment well. And how do they do it? Well, just by being present to their environment, very engaged in the space around you. Space is your reason to move. It's not the how, but it's the reason. Arms and legs aren't a reason to move. They might be a how. There you go. So You can direct yourself by being engaged outwards. You may have found yourself sometimes in that kind of outwards flow state, playing sport or something, and it just got miraculously, our brain shifts gear, and you're just engaged and you're up and out. And you end up being directed up and out in that way. A term like mechanical advantage, in many ways, is not too dissimilar to directing, because it's taking, and it's not mechanical guarantee, it's only an advantage, but you're taking the advantage of that relationship between our environment, which is gravity and that accelerating floor, and our skeletal structure. So it's, and functioning really is a relationship. So mechanical advantage basically traditionally means anywhere between standing and squatting. So as you go to sit and if I give a quick demonstration, as I go to sit, and if I stop halfway, we call this a position of mechanical advantage. It's a way of lowering yourself in space. So you can use your torso and your arms in a free way, play snooker, play golf, wash your hands in a low, sing, all sorts of things. But that position of mechanical advantage is really just being present to your reality of being a human being with the structure you have and the environment, the accelerating surface, just being present to that and using it. So you can really, in a nutshell, basically say the Alexander technique is about presence in a psychophysical manner, because in the Alexander technique, we think, we've observed it in ourselves. It's a long-standing tradition of observing behavior, and it's even an area of neurological study now called embodied cognition. We think that the mind and the body is a singular functional entity. So the mind and body aren't connected because they'd be two separate things to connect. Mind and body is just a singular functional whole. So taking that context, you've got a singular functional whole within an environment and your presence to that, and then you can respond accordingly. And what the Alexander technique allows you to do by having these concepts, these particular terms, they're aspects of presence that help you observe yourself in behavior and activity to see if you can see if you can perform more efficiently. So you have more better coordination. Another term that's just come to mind is non-doing. That's very analogous with the Tai Chi concept of the way. It's said that in doing, you do it, in non-doing, it does you. Again, it's that kind of flow state where you're not really thinking about it and you just kind of go with the flow. We call that non-doing. Again, that's a quality of presence. So yeah, in a nutshell, the whole of the Alexander technique, presence. Now, we are distilling a few elements of presence to be functionally useful to get over some, typically musculoskeletal issues and our overreaction to stress response. So we're not necessarily asking to be present to absolutely everything, which you can do from a learning point of view. If you're interested, let's say you do mindfulness exercises or meditation, you basically ask yourself, how much can you be present to? And you can include as much as you like. But for Alexander purposes, we might sort of say, well, is it that much value while you're struggling with repetitive strain injury, back pain, tendinitis, to be present to certain colours in the space around you? I mean, you may be present to them, but we're not going to talk about it within an Alexander context. No reason not to be aware of it, but being aware of that in itself isn't probably going to help you solve the problems that you come to the Alexander technique for. So we just distill a few of them to be useful. That's all. So that's my take on it. Maybe it's an oversimplification, but it works for me personally. You are free to disagree. But in order for anything to be useful, I do think it needs to be simple. And this is my way of distilling it to make it simple just for myself, just personally. Even if I never taught the Alexander technique and it wasn't my profession, but I still enjoyed taking lessons privately, I would still come to this sort of conclusion to make it useful to myself. So, if you disagree, I'd love to hear your comments. If you agree, I'm glad you agree with me. Anyway, that's enough for today, I think. I just let you know that I do have an online course. It's a 6-week structured introductory course. So if that interests you, do get in touch. So until the next time, take care and goodbye. All right.